It has often been said a women's strike is impossible due to non-strike clauses, precarious labor conditions, and the vulnerability that a majority of women face in their workplace. We believe, in spite of these difficulties, a strike can be both possible and fundamental in this political conjuncture. Therefore, we are pushing for a 1-hour strike, relying on the power of simultaneity to make our absence unavoidably felt in our homes, neighborhoods, and communal spaces, in our paid workplaces, and on the streets. We will be heard, and our collective strength will be known. We have a lot of great speakers today, and I just want to introduce some of them to you. Chaumtoli and should be here, as I said, a few minutes late, but everyone's also just going to give a brief introduction before they do. We have Jeanette Vizguerra from Denver. She was a woman that sought and won sanctuary in a church, amazingly. And also we have María Inés Orjuela, who was in Connecticut, a housekeeper in the Hilton Hotels that they won the right to unionize. Very rare victories. In our list of speakers, it said we had La Mystique. In place of La Mise, we have Suzanne Adely, who's also a human rights lawyer and an Arab-American organizer and labor organizer, wears many hats. And we also have Sarah Jaffe, who is a journalist and author of Necessary Trouble, among a whole lot of stuff, right? And Jimena Bustamante, and myself, Natalie Matos. We are in the International Women's Strike, New York City. And without further ado, we should...
I'm going to be interpreting into English, and so I want to remind the speakers also to pay attention to the pace of how fast they are speaking. So I'm back here. A ver, compañeras, déjenme sentarme acá atrás. ¿Se pueden mover un poquito más para medio para acá? Para acá. Ahí ven. Yeah. I think, sorry. Lista.
Buenas tardes a todos.
Good evening, good
Mi
afternoon.
historia es muy larga, entonces voy a resumir porque solo hay 10 minutos.
My history is very long, but I'm going to summarize because we only have 10 minutes.
Mi nombre es Jeanette Vizguerra y soy de la Ciudad de México, orgullosamente mexicana e inmigrante.
My name is Jeanette Vizguerra. I'm from Mexico City, and I'm very proudly Mexican.
Y llevo esos 20 años siendo activista. Soy un líder comunitario local en Denver, pero también a nivel nacional.
I have been an activist for 20 years in Denver and also nationally.
Mi primer trabajo fue como janitor. A los 7 meses de llegar aquí, me invitaron a trabajar directamente en CIU Loco 105.
My first job was as a janitor. After 7 months of being here, I was invited to work with SEIU.
Porque en solo 7 meses yo ya organizaba gente de haber venido a este país. Por las injusticias, los malos tratos, despidos injustificados. No era justo.
And after only 7 months of being here, I was already organizing my coworkers because of unjust layoffs, because of all the bad conditions at work, and it wasn't fair.
Basado en ese trabajo, el sindicato me invitó a trabajar directamente con ellos, donde duré 6 años, donde construí muchas relaciones a nivel local y a nivel nacional, haciendo todo lo que era para los trabajadores, que es la gente que le da a ganar a las compañías.
So I stayed working with the union for 6 years, and I developed a lot of relationships, not only locally but internationally, supporting workers and what they wanted because they are the ones that allow companies to make profit.
Salgo de trabajar del sindicato, pero yo sentía que tenía que seguir apoyando a la gente. Me involucré en una organización que trabajaba para derechos civiles, derechos humanos, que se llamaba Derechos para Todos, por 13 largos años.
And after working with the union, I got involved in another civil rights and human rights organization called Rights for All, doing similar work.
Donde uno tiene que estar peleando en contra de leyes fuertes que afectan a las comunidades. Leyes las quitamos, leyes regresan, pero estas luchas no terminan.
And so during those 13 years working with that other organization, we have been fighting really hard. There are a lot of laws that we are able to eliminate, but then they place other laws. So this is a struggle that never ends.
Al mismo tiempo, veíamos que se estaba viniendo los ataques a la comunidad inmigrante y había que hacer algo porque nadie estaba hablando del tema de inmigración.
So at the time, we also saw that at the same time, there were emerging attacks against immigrant people very clearly, and we wanted to start addressing that because nobody else was talking about that.
Desafortunadamente, en 2009 yo entro al sistema por leyes como la 287G, SB90 y comunidades seguras.
Unfortunately, in 2009, I entered the system because of SB 140 and other laws that were in place.
Leyes que permitían la cooperación entre policía y migración, y ese tipo de cooperación viola la Constitución.
These laws allow the cooperation between police and migration, and those laws are unconstitutional. They violate the Constitution.
Llevo más de 8 años peleando mi propio caso, peleando en contra de este sistema, en contra del gobierno federal.
So I have been fighting for more than 8 years against the federal government, fighting my own case.
Durante ese tiempo empecé a fundar la coalición Metro Denver Sanctuary Coalition, que ahora tenemos 15 iglesias en Denver.
Since then, I've been working, started the organization Metro Denver Coalition, and we have been building with churches to find places for sanctuary, and we have 15 churches at a time.
Lo hice pensando que en algún momento lo iba a necesitar, y el año pasado, con este nuevo presidente que hizo los cambios drásticos en inmigración, no tuve otra opción más que entrar yo misma a santuario.
And I did this thinking that maybe one day I will need sanctuary. And last year, with this new president that has done what he has done, I had to myself demand sanctuary.
Fueron 3 largos meses, pero creo que fue una experiencia buena porque yo no paré de organizar estando adentro.
And it was a really good experience because while I was in sanctuary inside, I didn't stop organizing. I continued to organize for those 3 months that I was in there.
Siempre estaba dando presentaciones en universidades y ahora los estudiantes iban a la iglesia.
I was always giving presentation to universities, but now students will be coming to the church.
Dando talleres de conozca sus derechos, creando eventos adentro para seguir construyendo comunidades fuertes y seguras.
And I was giving workshops and continue to organizing for communities that are strong and safe for immigrants.
Movilicé tanto a la gente que yo nunca pensé que mi caso iba a ser conocido a nivel mundial, que iban a ir medios de todas las partes del mundo a contar mi historia.
I was able to mobilize so many people during that time that my case, and I never thought this would happen, my case became known worldwide. And it was known all over the world.
Decimos los mexicanos, sin pelos en la lengua, yo hablé de cómo está el sistema, le enviaba mensajes al presidente Trump, porque yo no tengo miedo. Este sistema nos quiere oprimir, nos quiere callar, y eso no va a pasar.
As Mexicans say, I speak without hairs on my tongue. And I was sending messages to Trump because the system wants to oppress us and shut us down, but we will not allow this.
Y tal vez por ser como soy, la revista Times Magazine me nominó a una de las 100 personas más influyentes del mundo, porque no me van a callar.
And because how I am, Times Magazine nominated me as one of the most influential people this year, and they are not gonna shut my voice down.
Tuve la fortuna de volver a salir porque he estado 3 veces detenida en inmigración. He sido tan activa en la comunidad que mi comunidad junto conmigo logramos que 3 veces le he ganado al sistema y ahora lo volví a hacer saliendo de la iglesia.
I was able to leave 3 times because me and my community have been organizing so much that I was able to win the system 3 times already, and we will continue to organize with my community.
Ahora estoy aquí afuera y sigo organizando, porque hay más familias y miles de familias en la misma situación que yo. Estamos en una etapa donde el sistema nos está persiguiendo. Tenemos persecución ahora. Más activistas, al movimiento Santuario ha recibido ataques directamente, pero eso no va a hacer que nos intimiden, al contrario.
And I now continue to be here. I am outside. Thousands of families are living in this situation. We are at a moment, at a stage where this system, when the system is persecuting us. A lot of activists of the sanctuary movement are being persecuted by the government, but we won't stop.
Ahorita en Denver tenemos 4 mujeres que se están convirtiendo en líderes. Son madres que están luchando por sus familias, por sus hijos dentro de iglesias.
Right now in Denver, we have 4 women that are becoming very strong leaders. They are mothers, and they are working really hard in their churches.
Pero no solo se trata de ser activistas, se trata de demostrarle a este país la importancia de nuestro trabajo, de las contribuciones que hacemos, porque aunque soy inmigrante pago taxes.
And it's not only about being an activist, it's also demonstrating to this country that our work is important. I'm an immigrant, and I also pay taxes.
Y es por eso que estamos invitando y convocando el 8 de marzo a que todas las mujeres hagamos un paro general en todas nuestras actividades para que vean la importancia y la contribución que tienen las mujeres en este país.
And that is why we are calling for a strike on March 8th, so that people can feel the importance of our presence and our work.
Pero sobre todo la importancia que tiene la mujer de color.
But also, overall, the importance of the work of women of color.
Porque con el paso de los años estamos avanzando, siempre estamos peleando por igualdad en todas las áreas que nos afectan y lo estamos logrando. Van 2 años que salen miles y miles de mujeres a demostrar la fuerza cuando están unidas y organizadas.
And with the pass of years, we continue to fight for equality, and we are winning because we have thousands and thousands of women that have been going out in March and demonstrating. So we are winning.
Y este 8 de marzo tenemos esa oportunidad, donde también nos toca como mujeres crear unidad y ser inclusivas, porque muchas veces se enfocan en una sola área de mujeres. Desafortunadamente el año pasado, Women's March solo era de mujeres blancas y no nos daban la oportunidad a las mujeres de color de salir a levantar nuestra voz.
And so we see March 8th as an opportunity to create more unity among women and also be inclusive. We want to center our attention. Sometimes these movements center their attention only in one group of women. Like last year, Women's March was only focused on white women. But we are going to change that, and we're going to mobilize.
Y este 8 de marzo queremos inclusión y queremos poder en las calles de todas las mujeres.
In this March 8th, we want inclusion, and we want the power of all women in the streets.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes para todos. Mi nombre es María Inés Orjuela. Soy colombiana. Trabajo hace 4 años en el Hotel Hilton de Stamford como housekeeping.
My name is María Inés Orjuela. And ¿cuántos años has estado trabajando?
4 años.
And I've been working at the Hilton in Stamford for 4 years.
A nosotros, exactamente en ese hotel, cuando yo entré personalmente, habían buenas condiciones laborales, buenos jefes. Esto poco a poco fue cambiando.
When I started in the hotel, Also, I forgot to say, she said, I'm Colombian. And when I started personally in the hotel, there were good working conditions, we had good bosses, but that started to change.
A medida que la compañía cambió, el hotel cambió de compañía, ya fueron cambiando las cosas, nos fueron presionando con trabajo, más abuso laboral. A nosotros ya empezaron a implementarnos muchísimos más habitaciones. Ha sido tanto que los jefes llegaron a decirnos que no teníamos por qué bajar cansadas ni quejarnos.
So the company changed, the management changed, and they started to pressure us for doing more work. We started experiencing more abuse. They were giving us more rooms, to the point that the bosses told us that we should not be coming down tired or complain.
Llegaron al punto de darnos hasta 40 habitaciones para limpiar, 24, 25 checkouts, y no tener uno el derecho a bajar cansado, a decirle al jefe, me duele, eso es algo absurdo.
And so we had 40 rooms, 24 to 25 checkouts, and not having the right to say, I'm tired, or say anything about our pain, our physical pain, is just unjust.
Poco a poco nos sentíamos tan presionadas que no había nadie que nos defendiera.
We felt so much pressure, and there was no one to defend us.
Que entre nosotros mismos, como compañeras, más que todo mujeres, porque sobre todo housekeeping es de mujeres, entonces fuimos diciendo, tenemos que hacer algo por nosotras mismas.
So we as compañeros started to see how this was going, and it's mostly women, because housekeeping is women's labor, and so we started to come together.
Alguien nos dijo, tienen que buscar la unión, si no, ustedes están perdidas. Entonces decidimos fortalecernos para formar la unión.
And someone told us that we should look for a union, and so that's what we started to do, and we started to come together and find a union.
Allá las mujeres decidimos hablar con la persona indicada y organizarnos. Uno a uno nos fuimos dialogando con nuestros compañeros, con nuestras compañeras, hasta llegar al punto de que todo el hotel se organizó para apoyarnos entre nosotros y asimismo formar la unión.
And then between us women, we talked to the right person to start doing this. And one by one, we talked to each other, we talked to our compañeros all over the hotel, and that's how we organized the entire hotel.
Fue con esfuerzo, fue con lucha, pero sobre todo fue teniendo la necesidad, lo que nos daba más la fuerza.
And it was a huge effort. It was a difficult fight, but we strengthened each other and we started to fight.
Así buscamos a la persona que nos indicó qué teníamos que hacer. Entonces nos fuimos organizando.
And then we looked for a person to tell us, to guide us what to do, and we started to do more organizing.
Y formando poco a poco con reuniones, hicimos muchas, porque nos hicieron muchas reuniones para poder fortalecernos. Entre compañeros íbamos poco a poco convenciendo más compañeros y así llegamos al punto de que ya a cierto punto ya estábamos todos organizados.
And we started to form groups. We had meetings. We had lots of meetings to become stronger, to the point when we felt stronger and organized.
Nosotros en el hotel, hoy por hoy, somos muy organizados, somos muy unidos, porque eso es lo más importante, ser unidos, ser compañeristas, no estar abiertos, sino estar todos como una sola cadena.
Right now in the hotel, we're very united. We work together very closely, and we are close like a chain.
La lucha fue fuerte porque cuando nos preparábamos y teníamos un poco de susto, pero un día nos fuimos y el 13 de noviembre nos organizamos todos los empleados fuera del hotel.
And so the fight was really strong. We were a little afraid, and on November 13, we were all organized outside.
Yes. Sorry. Luego fuimos hasta la gerencia. Los tomamos por sorpresa, porque para ellos fue una gran sorpresa el ver todos sus empleados reunidos, donde le pasábamos al gerente la petición de que queríamos la unión y les exigimos respetar nuestros derechos.
And then we went to management and we surprised them. And they looked very surprised to see all the workers together come, and the manager was there, and we gave him the letter of the things that we wanted to tell them that we needed.
De ahí en adelante hubo una lucha bastante fuerte, pues la compañía se dedicó en adelante a contratar abogados y personalidades de afuera.
And then the hardest part of the fight started. The company started to hire lawyers and other external people.
La intención de ellos siempre fue truncar la idea de nosotros de formar la unión.
And their intention was to become an obstacle for us to start the union.
Incluso contrataron la compañía Cruz Asociados, que tengo entendido es la compañía que contrata el presidente para sus hoteles.
They even hired the company Cruz Associated, which is the company that Trump hires to clean his hotels.
Y muchas otras personas. Fueron 3 semanas que las estuvieron gastando comida, dormida, todo VIP para ellos gratis en el hotel.
And so they started bringing also other people, but for 3 weeks they brought all these VIP people. They were paying their food, their rooms, and they were there for 3 weeks, all VIP things only for them.
Para tratar siempre de decirnos voten no, la unión es mala, la unión no les sirve.
And this was to tell us, to make us think that, to tell us that to vote no, that the union was bad for us.
A los cuartos iban siempre las personas que tenía la compañía a tratar de convencernos. Siempre, primero nos llevaron por grupos, luego fueron uno a uno a nuestros sitios de trabajo a tratar de convencernos de que no votáramos por la unión.
And these people will go up to the rooms. First of all, they will have group meetings with us to try to convince us that the union was bad for us. And then they will also go individually to meet with each of us in the rooms to tell us that the union was not good for us.
Todas esas personalidades que trataron de convencernos fue algo inútil que consiguió la compañía porque no lo lograron. Nosotros fuimos más fuertes, estábamos muy fortalecidos.
And all those people that they hired and that brought to the hotel were useless because they weren't able to convince us of what they were saying. We were strong and we didn't believe them.
Nosotros... Thank you. Ay, Dios mío. Gracias. Nosotros nos preparamos muy bien para el día de las elecciones.
And we prepared a lot for the election day.
Nosotros a las 5:30 de la mañana nos organizamos fuera del hotel, de ahí pasamos a la votación.
And so we organized very well for the day, and at 5 in the morning we were outside of the hotel, and then we went to the voting.
Ganamos 110 puntos a favor de la unión por 110 votos a favor de la unión por 5 a favor de la compañía.
And we won 110 in favor and 5 against for the company.
Thank you. Ahorita estamos luchando por un buen contrato. Ahorita contrataron otra compañía bien fuerte, que es... ay, se me olvidó el nombre en este momento, perdón. Bueno, I'm sorry. Es una compañía también, es como la número 1 en truncar negociaciones, pero nos estamos preparando con huelgas, con acciones, con todo lo que sea posible, porque no nos van a parar aquí. No por el nombre de esa compañía o esos señores no nos van a truncar nuestros sueños de hacer valer nuestros derechos y nuestras razones que tenemos para luchar.
And now we are fighting for a good contract, but they hired another company. I don't remember the name. I'm sorry. But they are also trying to to create obstacles for our negotiations, for our contract negotiations. But we won't stop. They won't stop our dream, and we're gonna continue and move forward.
Jackson Lewis es la compañía, sorry.
The company's name is Jackson Lewis.
Sí. También nos estamos preparando en el hotel y estamos tratando de ayudar a otros compañeros de otros hoteles a unirse y estamos preparando nuestra huelga también para el 8 de marzo, porque estamos unidos. Allá somos un hotel muy unidos, las mujeres somos muy unidas, nuestros compañeros somos una cadena, vuelvo y repito, para formar una huelga, para una unión hay que ser una cadena, ser bien fuertes, así, unidos.
And
Así no se puede lograr nada.
And we're getting prepared. We're getting prepared in the hotel. We are working with other workers or other hotel workers to support them in their efforts as well. Women in our hotel are united, and we are united for the strike on March 8th. And for that, we have to be united like a chain. To be able to have a union, to be able to have a strike, we have to be like a chain, united like a chain.
Yeah. Gracias. ¿Nos podemos retirar?
Assalamu alaikum. Shagatum. And welcome. This is an international movement, and so I want to bring into this space the sisters and ancestors of mine from Bangladesh, present and past, who have been fighting for before I was born and born to the space. And I just want to acknowledge and remember them, because even though I'm here in front of you, just as a reminder that when we speak as women of color, we speak in collective spirit. And I also know that my Bangladeshi feminist sisters I think it's live streamed, so they're with me. So I wanted to indulge, if you would take a breath with me so that I know that you're with me, with us, together, to begin to build this chain that the sister mentioned. So can we do that? Okay. So I want to start with a personal story, even though much of my work has been around being an organizer, lawyer, and I know Jackson Lewis, they're the worst union-busting law firms ever. To start with that, to really understand why, for me, this space, this moment, this movement is so important, and I want to bring in my sort of personal story to share why transnational, global feminist movement is really the movement that we need to be at and with together today. I was born in 1971 during Bangladesh's war for independence, and during that time, many of you may know that Bangladeshi women experienced first experience of rape and genocide as a tool of violence, with the support of the United States, Kissinger, providing weapons to Pakistan at the time to oppose the liberation movement. After Bangladesh became independent, my family, which aligned around left politics, found themselves afraid because at that moment there was a centralizing force where any left politician were murdered. We found ourselves in the Bronx, in the working class, beautiful community of Parkchester. And that's where I grew up through different circumstances with my mother, a proud 1199 retiree who raised 2 children in New York City. So I know very clearly through my own eyes as a girl, as a young woman, that, and now as a mother, that racism, violence, imperialism, sexism, state violence are interlocking oppressions, and that they work on the bodies of all people, women, women of color, in most violent ways. We experience that daily through poverty, through state violence, through all these forms of oppression. I also know that if we lift up and support organizing, that we can actually challenge and put some resistance to some of these oppressions. I know that just from the numerous organizers that I have had a privilege to work with and beside. I also share another personal story that as a woman of color, it doesn't matter whether or not you achieve a certain social capital, because in 2014, after protesting the Gaza, violence in Gaza Strip, and where children were killed, I found myself being violently arrested by NYPD in New York City at a time when I was actually the highest, one of the first highest ranking attorney for the city, for the public advocate. That did not protect me as a Muslim woman, as a woman of color, as a mother who was waiting on the street for her kids to return from using the bathroom. So I know that how state violence continues to work into our lives and how racism and sexism works on the body and our bodies in so many ways. And so I think for us, it's important to support women-led, women of color-led movements, and important for us to show solidarity with movements around the world. Transnational global movements are important because if we don't center women who are organizing at the local level, we're going to lose a lot of powerful leaders in our movement. For example, if we simply focus on US as the site for our activism, you won't know at the moment there is a mass genocide of Rohingya people coming into Bangladesh from Myanmar. You won't know that corporate brands are actually using and thinking about Myanmar, Burma, as a site to produce garments, right? So they're all sort of interlocking. We can't really disentangle all of these forms of oppression. You might not know that at the moment, Rohingya women who are in camps and children are experiencing, again, what my foremothers in 1971 experienced of rape and other forms of sexual violence, because we have not centered the struggles of local women. We have not centered our movement around local organizing. And so I just sort of share why, for me, it's so important to have a feminist movement that is really centered around working class women, around working class people, and the struggles of working communities. And so when we center the folks, then we can see why a strike and a lack of cooperation with the system is so necessary. And so I want to just kind of share with you a couple of points, and I hope that we have an engagement and conversation on these. Law and technology, I founded a web platform that brings activists globally together, is one tool to bring us together, and we should use technology, and I'm glad that we're live streaming and using all of the media tools, but nothing substitutes organizing. Nothing substitutes on the ground building relationships and building power and building leadership of women and working class women leading those movements. This I know again, as I mentioned, through my work with tea workers in Bangladesh who squatted on lands that were threatened to be taken away by the government of Bangladesh to be then repurposed for industry, for corporate interest. They just squatted and they said, take my blood, but don't take my land. I mean, that's the kind of struggle that we need to bring in to our struggle. I'm talking about garment worker organizing in Bangladesh, where sisters are saying that we need to organize and that you, as allies, need to support us in organizing. You can buy fast fashion, fine, consumer activism, but really what they want is support around activism and organizing. And they are also in support with you today. So I wanted to sort of mention just being a labor advocate, and I think a lot about the sort of idea of the strike. And I wanted to sort of put out there today sort of a concept that might help us to think a little bit broadly about the women's strike. So, I think typically when we think about the strike or a strike, we always locate it very narrowly in the traditional workplace setting. But we know as women and we know as organizers that our lives are not limited to our roles as workers. We have other identities. So I want us to think about sort of the concept of the strike much more broadly. What is the strike? A strike is, if you look at, I went into the dictionary, I mean, it's a direct confrontation. It's a deliberate and direct confrontation. And so what we are saying is that whatever tools are at your disposal to unapologetically say, right, and deliberately and strategically say, communicate a refusal to accommodate to a system of exploitation. That is what a strike is. That may mean different things for each of us. For those of us who are workers or in workplaces, that may mean withholding our labor. For those of us who are caregivers or mothers in other social roles, that may mean disrupting those identities and those roles. So what I want us to think about is when you strike on March 8th, right, and show support, that think about all the ways you can disrupt the sexism, the racism, and all the exploitation that operates on our bodies, and intentionally and deliberately refuse to accommodate. Because when we look at the roots of the labor movement, that is what a strike is that we refuse to cooperate in a system that exploits us, right? And so if you're a student, what does that mean? If you're a worker, what does it mean? What does it mean for you to refuse to accommodate? When we see the strike in this broader way, we are able to bring more folks into our movement, and we can also address some of the challenges, the real. I mean, as an organizer, we got to be real. Not everyone can afford to take a day off. Let's be real, right? And so, those are realities. But everyone can engage in an action that intentionally communicates a refusal to accommodate and be complicit to the system. We can do it in all different ways and figure out what ways work for us, right? I also want to sort of mention that we want not to be ableist in this, right? Protests, as someone who is now sort of suffering with a lot of sort of movement, physical movement issues, what does it mean to participate physically in a movement and register my strike? So it allows us to really broaden how we think about the strike, and it allows us to also bring in more ally supporters in this movement, and really make it a visible, intentional, deliberate action that we're just not going to, be complicit. We're not going to accommodate. We're not going to accept this at all. Women and I can speak from my experiences in working with low-wage women, immigrant women in New York City, and also in Bangladesh, they are saying that already. They are already organizing. They are already doing community defense, meaning figuring out ways to resist ICE deportation in their communities, ways that they can actually throw their bodies to prevent deportation of families, how we can engage in a widespread community defense struggle to protect those who we are sort of in community with. So think about the multitude of ways in which you, groups that you're part of, can really register this, this strike in this broader terms. And I think that if we do that, we're able to really bring much more folks into the struggle. So thank you so much, and I really look forward to the engagement and hearing from all of you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Suzanne Adely, and as Natalie mentioned, I am a lawyer, a member of the National Lawyers Guild. I'm also a labor organizer, currently working with an organization called the Food Chain Workers Alliance, which collectively represents some 300,000 workers along the food chain in the United States and Canada. I also have been a community organizer for the Arab American communities in New York and in Chicago for several years. And in that capacity, I've worked in helping to sort of organize and work alongside with mainly low-wage Arabic-speaking women in Chicago and in some of the New York areas. And I joined the International Women's Strike Mobilization last year as a member of their national organizing collective, and then as part of their local New York organizing team. And I want to talk a little bit about why I chose to work with the International Women's Strike. And I think that, I will follow what Chaumtoli was saying about how these efforts, this mobilization is an opportunity and has been an opportunity to sort of rethink, what it means to confront, the systems, the conditions, the roots of our oppression, as women, as people, and as workers. And certainly the way that immigrant workers have done in recent years, such as the May 1st, 2006 mobilization and the Day Without an Immigrant mobilizations, the International Women's Strike was able last year to regenerate a new conversation in this country about what it means to strike and to broaden the idea of what it means to strike, and also broaden the idea of what labor is, and particularly women's labor. I'm coming from a community where, I have aunts, I have a mother who for much of their labor, has been taking care of their land, taking care of their families, taking care of their neighbors. A labor that is physical, that's emotional, and it's often unacknowledged, and it's often unpaid. But it's very much a part of why our communities are able to sustain themselves. And it's something that I sort of confront every day. And I felt like this space was a space in which I could talk about the experiences of women in my community in a way that other women understood. I can talk about what it means to strike or to participate in a way that is really confronting capitalism or confronting patriarchy and confronting state violence and gendered violence. And do it in a way that also, do it in a way that also broadens the idea of what gendered violence is. And in particular, my experience with the International Women's Strike, well, let me just go back for a second and say that I also agree with what Chaumtoli was saying about being meaningful and sort of reflecting of what it means to be a transnational sort of feminist organization. And I think some of the most important examples of protest and particularly the use of strike you can find in other parts of the globe, and particularly strikes or mobilizations that have been spearheaded by women in places like Egypt and in places like India, and as Chaumtoli said, in places like Bangladesh, in very often very repressive conditions, right? And And I think that, we need to sort of look at those movements for inspiration, and we also need to look at the history of labor movements and the use of the strike in this country for people to sort of understand the role that they have played in confronting white supremacy and in confronting capitalist exploitation. And so getting to this idea of collectively coming together to protest or to strike for our demands as women who want to confront the root causes of our oppression. The way that we look at gendered violence is broader than how gendered violence might be presented in spaces like the Women's March. For us, gendered violence very much includes state violence at the hands of police officers. Whether they be victims themselves, or they be the mothers or the fathers or the husbands of victims. And it also includes violence against women that is created by colonialism, by economic capitalism, and it includes violence against women that is created by US wars and imperialism. And it was very important for our community that the International Women's Strike welcomed the Palestinian movement as one that they recognized had to be included, and recognized that within our mobilization, there had to be an acknowledgement and of the role that our government plays in oppressing women in other countries like Palestine, providing the economic and political fuel to continue the occupation of Palestine, or providing the economic or political fuel to continue wars like the ones that we see happening in Yemen, which has been quite devastating to women and their children, as well as to everybody else. And I want everybody to sort of be aware that this March 2018, will also be the 15th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq. And the violence that has befallen the women of Iraq and the women of the region since the war and terror began is immeasurable. And so in that vein, we really must sort of bring to any mobilization like the International Women's Strike or any mobilization like May Day, we really must bring the demand to end US imperialism and to end US empire. And so I'm proud to be part of a collective of women around the country and around the world who coined the term feminism of the 99%, and then backed up that term by saying that within feminism of the 99%, there's no room for racism, there's no room for white supremacy, and there's no room for Zionism. And likewise, it confronts the capitalist system that also perpetuates the gendered violence and oppression that women are experiencing. And all of that together, I think, really helps to sort of pierce the neoliberal hegemony that comes with mainstream feminist mobilizations. I'm not saying that we don't participate in those mobilizations, but I'm saying that we confront them for what they are lacking. And I want to also end by saying that one of the clear demands that we have put forth as part of the International Women's Strike is for the decolonization of Palestine. And this year we've added to that is freedom for the Palestinian political prisoner Ahed Tamimi. I don't know how many of you know who she is. But on Tuesday, she will turn 17, or Wednesday, she will turn 17, just as she will face Israeli military court. And is in danger of going to prison for a decade for the act of slapping an Israeli soldier after he shot her cousin in the head. And her case has become quite famous because her family have been part of consistent sort of popular organizing in their village against Israeli occupying forces. And her mother is also in prison right now. But Ahed is actually one of almost 400 children that are in Israeli prisons right now and also are subjected to military courts. The youngest woman in Israel's prisons is 14. The youngest boys who are arrested are often as young as 5 years old, abducted, taken from their homes. It's part of the systematic violence that the United States protects and the United States funds. And so we will be marching for women like Ahed and all of Palestine's political prisoners, and we will be marching for an end to US wars in the Middle East and all over the world, and we're marching for accountability for US war crimes against women.
How do I follow all of these incredible women? Thank you all for giving me a really hard job. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a labor reporter and a somewhat social movement reporter. And so I wanted to talk about the sort of movement moment that we're in here, which is, there are a few of them really, but I'm thinking about the Me Too moment. And there was a lot of discussion leading up to this year's women's strike about how do we fit this into our politics? How do we think about a moment that, is dated to sort of a news story about Harvey Weinstein, who's a, very rich Hollywood producer who was sexually harassing a lot of very rich, sort of comparatively powerful women. And so in the middle of the Me Too moment, which I guess has been going on since this fall and shows no sign of stopping, which I think is great, I met a group of women from Brooklyn who call themselves Las Mujeres Guerreras, and please pardon my inability to roll my R's. I've been trying for years and failing. And so they are a group of women that were part of the organizing committee in Flatbush that had been organizing grocery store workers, other food service workers for several years. And these are women who, in the context of these organizing meetings, started talking to each other about other problems that they had. And they began talking particularly about domestic violence and finding that several of them actually faced domestic violence. And so they formed a group that, again, came out of this labor organizing committee to specifically deal with the issues of gender violence that these women were facing, some of which happens at work, some of which happens in the home, some of which happens on the street. And as we've been just hearing about, some of it comes from the state. So these women supported each other, helped each other get away from situations at times. And this is what can happen when a labor movement roots itself in the community and understands that workers' lives don't end when they leave the job, but that actually their struggles in the home can actually be connected to their struggles in the workplace, that the domestic violence they face is connected to the oppression they face in the workplace. So I said we've been dating the beginning of the Me Too movement to Harvey Weinstein, but I've actually been thinking about it lately as dating back to when Donald Trump, in a move that was basically guaranteed to be seen as a slap in the face to the fight for 15, nominated Andy Puzder to be labor secretary. For those who have not been paying attention, because he didn't make it through, Andy Puzder was a fast food CEO. He ran the company that runs Hardee's and Carl's Jr. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. So Andy Puzder is the CEO of the company that runs Hardee's and Carl's Jr. fast food restaurants. And, well, this was, of course, interpreted the way it was meant to be, which was a swipe at workers who have been organizing for years, demanding better wages and better conditions in the fast food industry. But they're still organizing. And so we heard about the astronomical rates of sexual harassment in these fast food restaurants, on top of the already astronomical 40% rate of sexual harassment in the food service industry in general. We heard about Andy Puzder himself being sued for sexual harassment of a woman who worked in his office. And we heard about his record of being accused of domestic violence by his ex-wife. And we saw protest after protest after protest from the fast food workers who said this company, which also has a record of really sexist advertising. I don't know if anybody in here has ever seen these ads with sort of women in bikinis. And so women who had been organizing in the workplace made these connections and made these issues impossible to ignore. And Andy Puzder was the one of Trump's nominees that withdrew his name and did not actually take a cabinet position. Not that the guy who has a cabinet position in his place is any good, but he was not actually a fast food CEO. So I've been thinking about the Me Too movement as actually dating back to that, to a moment when not Hollywood stars, although, you know, I'm happy that the Hollywood stars are speaking up, but to women who worked in fast food restaurants saying, this is a problem, this is a specific problem at these restaurants that this guy's culture of business has encouraged from the top down. And so that sunk him. And so we've been talking a little bit about what a strike is and how a strike works. And the strike this year, coming in the context, again, of a national conversation about sexual harassment that is now leading to a national conversation about sexual violence and power. And so I have in my notes here sort of 3 things that the strike is broadly conceived of as doing, right? And as we said, the strike, as narrowly conceived, is assumed to be a strike of workers. Most people assume it's in a factory. They probably picture white guys, and that is the withdrawal of their labor in order to disrupt production, which is important. I'm not going to say it's not important. There is also, as Jeanette mentioned, the withdrawal of your labor to demonstrate its importance. So I think when I'm telling this story, there was a few years ago a strike put on by flight attendants at a particular Korean airline that I'm forgetting the name of right now. They went on a smile strike. So they still went to work, they still showed up at work, they just refused to smile. I love that. I think that's right, it's also much easier at work to not have to smile at your customers. And this was brilliant. There's a lot of conversation about the term emotional labor these days, and the term was literally coined by Arlie Ruxell Hochschild about flight attendants and the smile that they have to put on while dealing with angry airport customers who are mad because they've just been groped by TSA and and then the last thing that the strike can do, and this, I think, relates again to the conversation we're having about it being an international women's strike, is that it's a demonstration of solidarity and political power. And so when we think about women's strike, I'm thinking about the women in Ireland who are striking for legal abortion, to repeal the 8th Amendment to their constitution, which not only bans abortion, but gives the fetus pretty much literally more rights than the woman. I'm thinking about the Polish women who went on a similar strike. I am thinking of the women in Bangladesh. I'm thinking of women all over the world who are striking to demonstrate against very particular oppressions where they are, but also against the ones that connect us all. And so, on that note, I think everybody else said everything I wanted to say, so I'm going to hand it over.
Well, if Sarah thought that she had a hard time after all these speakers, I have like a double hard time, but I'm gonna try. I am Jimena Bustamante from the International Women's Strike New York City, and also from the National Committee. I guess that everyone here has spoke a little bit about themselves. The only important thing that I want to say regarding that is that I've been part of the Latin American feminist movement since I have memory. And I'm going to abound on the sort of like global dimension of the strike, even though you all already touched upon that. But I just want to pay our dues to the Latin American feminist movement. People were speaking about Poland, that of course was crucial as beginning the wave of women's strike last year. But we should also emphasize Argentina and the movement Ni Una Menos, and to say that Ni Una Menos that Ni Una Menos is building already in a history of like decades of feminist organizing in Latin America and the struggle against the forces of cooptation that Latin American feminists have been facing, particularly on the side of multinational organizations and their brand of liberal feminism. It seems that, I mean, since I'm part of IWS New York City, I want to focus on New York. And I want to say that, I mean, this is a sort of tough task. We know that New York is a crucial battleground, right? Like, it's of crucial strategic importance for the capitalist class, since it's a capital of the world. But precisely because of that, it's also of crucial strategic importance for the organized working class. Right? And when we say the organized working class in New York, we mean like millions of immigrant workers, right? And of women immigrant workers. So it's not just that we're standing in support of the struggles abroad, but it's just that that abroad is already inside. We are here. So as the speakers that preceded me were pointing out, IWS emerged in 2017 as a network in the United States and around the world to organize the women's strike on March 8th. But particularly, IWS New York City had always had like a very important role in that process of organization nationally. We kept working after March 8th, and we are now a collective here in the city. As Natalie pointed out, we have engaged with different projects. We have been very focused in developing relations with low-wage organizations that are mostly composed by women and mostly composed by women of color. If you want to read some of the interviews that we have done with organizers from worker centers and cooperatives, once again, they are over there in the table, and you can find them online in the public seminar page. This continuous work in New York City is what has allowed us now to sort of like, now that there's a word of a global women's strike happening again, this allows us to gather our forces back. So I really want to recognize all the people that stood around during this last year when there was not that much hype around us, right? So thank you, Natalie, Josephine, Julie, like all 10 people that have participated in the interview project doing translations, interviewing. So in 2018, I believe that it's very important for you to know that in New York City, our organizing process is focusing on building a coalition. And this is a coalition that includes radical caucuses within unions, worker centers, cooperatives, socialist groups, immigrant rights organizations, feminist grassroots organizations, community-based organizations, and just like different groups working around social justice. Our politics is aimed to tackle the structural origins of the multiple forms of oppression, exploitation, and dispossessions that we experience, and this entails articulating already existing struggles as both working class and feminist struggles. As everyone already sort of pointed out, we recognize that our movement derives its strength from a variety of struggles from below. I mean, these struggles are already alive and are already happening. And as such, our aim is to take part in the radical transformation of current social relations. In contrast to mainstream liberal politics, our movement has never been oriented to getting electoral gains. but our movement represents, just like following what Chaumtoli said before, it's a refusal, right? And our movement is a refusal to confine the horizons of social change to the terms defined by the Democratic Party. For all these reasons, articulating an anti-capitalist feminist front coalition is of particular strategic relevance at this moment. As the massive participation in the Women's March reveals, there's a generalized discontent regarding the Trump's presidency, his policies, but furthermore, the structural conditions that made that presidency possible. And the popular force that we saw on the streets is already manifesting through a multiplicity of women's struggles. What we want to say in IWS New York City is that we should not let that popular force be confined. Right? This popular force is not only sort of like manifesting itself in the US, it has an international character. And just like, again, just reiterating what everyone said, our movement recognizes and embraces its global relevance. We know ourselves as part of a global feminist struggle that perhaps is one of the few serious contenders to the rise of the global right? And hence, it's one of the most important potential embodiments of an international working class alternative. So, the importance of our strategic reappropriation of a classic labor tactics such as the strike cannot be overemphasized, and people, like Chaumtoli, Suzanne, Sarah already addressed it. So the only thing that I want to say is that we have been discussing with our coalition partners, and we have agreed that in New York City, we are calling for a 1-hour strike from all labor, paid and unpaid, on March 8th from 4 to 5 p.m. After that, we're going to have a rally in Washington Square Park, and then a march. With the input of our coalition partners, we have put together a set of preliminary demands, and I want to emphasize the word preliminary, because the task of working with so many struggles and trying to find a common ground, articulate all this through an anti-capitalist feminist perspective is a challenge. So what are some of these preliminary demands? First, we demand legal protection for women's rights, as well as policies and services that allow women, especially working-class women, women of color, undocumented immigrants, and trans women, to effectively enjoy these formal rights. This is why we strike over the right for reproductive rights, including access to free and safe abortion. We demand the right of women to a life free of violence, sexual and otherwise, in all the arenas that we inhabit and sustain. And this is why we support the fight of food service industry workers against sexual harassment. We demand labor rights for all women. We strike for the recognition of women's unpaid work outside the workplace, for living minimum wage, for equal pay, for the right to unionize, as we have already have María Inés tell us how hard it is, and for the right to collective bargaining, against wage theft, which is one of the major struggles that our compañeras in the worker centers are facing, and for fully paid family and sick leave. We demand universal social services. We will strike for the New York Health Act that provides access to affordable health care. For funds to public schools, and from free higher education. For affordable housing, and for adequate funding for our transportation system. Okay? So, because as we know, like commuting time is also a form of extraction, right? That is not happening in the workplace, but it is. And then we demand full rights for immigrant women. We strike for paths to citizenship and full rights for undocumented immigrants. We strike to stop the deportation machine that terrorizes communities and separates families. We demand that ICE stays out of the courts. for their present, pushes immigrant women suffering from abuse and violence at home or in the workplace to stay silent. And we strike against the building of a wall between Mexico and the US. As two Mexicans in the table can tell you, we won't let that happen. We strike against white supremacy and institutionalized racism, and we support the struggle of Black women against it. And we strike against the structural conditions that value the life of women of color as lesser than their white counterparts. We strike against the police state. We demand an end to police brutality, in particularly regarding women and with an emphasis on sexual violence. We demand an end to broken windows policies and ICE raids. We strike against mass incarceration, deportation, and the privatization of jails and detention centers. We demand justice for Ann Chambers in her fight against the NYPD and the officers that sexually assaulted her. And once again, because this is an international movement, we will strike in New York City, the beating heart of global capitalism, to demand an end to the imperial wars abroad from Syria to Yemen, the blood-soaked global drug wars from Mexico to the Philippines, an end to all neo-colonial projects from Puerto Rico to Palestine. And we strike against any increase to the military budget and against the US intervention in democratic processes around the world and the covert crackdown on leftist governments like Honduras, Brazil, and Venezuela. So now, to borrow a phrase that the Polish compass were using, because we are all that is left, on March 8th, we strike.